A bill has been introduced at the U.S. Senate that seeks to end dual citizenship for Americans. For Filipino Americans, this could mean making a tough choice soon. And what other issues affect US-Philippine relations? Good morning, I'm Atty. Karen Jimeno, and this is At the Forefront. Filipino Americans who hold dual citizenship face an uncertain future. This after a Senate bill seeks to eliminate dual citizenship in the United States. The Exclusive Citizenship Act of 2025, authored by Senator Bernie Moreno, would require U.S. citizens to forfeit their dual citizenship. Let's get some clarifications on this matter and other issues related to the Philippine-U.S. relations. We'll be speaking to former Philippine ambassador to the U.S., Jose Cuisia. Good morning, Ambassador Joe.
Good morning, Atty. Karen. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
Thank you for being here, even if we're so close to Christmas, almost Christmas Eve tonight.
That's right.
Okay, let's start first. What do you think is the motive behind the Exclusive Citizenship Act of 2025 that was filed by Republican Senator Bernie Moreno?
I think Senator Moreno would like to ensure that U.S. citizens have only one country to whom they pledge their loyalty. But I think he forgets the fact that this U.S. citizenships could still continue to be very good U.S. citizens even if they have a dual citizenship. That has already been, as has been proven many times and over many decades. No? I think he has a wrong, motivation. And I think it's very unlikely that his bill will pass because there's very little support for it. No? There's no other Republican or Democratic senator who has supported the bill. So it's not likely to pass. And also, even if he tries to get it into the Senate for discussion, there will be a lot of opponents because the other senators, both Republicans and Democrats, have constituents who hold dual citizenship.
Do you think the President Trump, would support this bill, considering his wife Melania and his son Barron are also Slovenian citizens?
Yes, correct. They do have dual citizenship, and so it is unlikely that President Trump will support this bill. No? It is an unconstitutional bill because U.S. citizenship cannot be removed unless there is a voluntary renunciation. That is already held by two Supreme Court decisions, one in 1967, Alfoyim versus Rusk, and the one in 1980, Vance versus Terrazas. So both Supreme Court decisions impose that the citizenship cannot be removed unless it is voluntarily renounced.
What if this law requires just one citizenship, then it would force people to renounce?
Well, this is why it would be ruled unconstitutional.
Because it's practically removing it, right?
Correct.
But
because it is a right, it is not a privilege that's granted by Congress. No? So that's why it will be ruled unconstitutional.
Yeah. In your experience, you've lived in the United States.
Yeah.
For Filipino Americans, how difficult would the choice be? Do you think that it's easy for them to just choose to be Americans, or would they have considerations as to wanting to stay as dual Filipinos as well?
Oh, yes. Mostly, remember that if they give up their Filipino citizenship, they cannot own properties in the Philippines. No? So it's going to be very difficult for those dual citizens, Filipinos who have dual citizenship. And also, there are many Filipino Americans who still love their country, they love the Philippines, even though they of course see the benefits of being a U.S. citizen. They would still want to retain their Filipino citizenship, no?
In your years of experience as an ambassador to the United States, what common issues do Filipinos face when they're in the United States, or those that are Filipino Americans?
Well, you know, many of them, of course, want to bring their families into the U.S. to also acquire U.S. citizenship. And because of the long wait, you know, because of they cannot, of course, acquire they cannot acquire U.S. citizenship for about, say, 10, 15 years. It is one of the concerns that many of the Filipino Americans in the U.S. I have two daughters, for example. They had to wait for about 10, 12 years for their citizenship, even though they were sponsored by their companies to get to be U.S. citizens. No? And if they were to sponsor their sisters or even their nephews and nieces, it would take easily 20 years today.
Wow,
Before it was
20
much
years.
longer. I mean, it was much shorter in the past, but now it's much longer, no? So many of them still want to bring family members into the U.S. because they get the benefits of the health benefits, particularly, which are certainly much better than the health benefits that Filipino citizens have.
When you were ambassador, was it common for you to get requests to help people to get appointments with the U.S. Embassy here in the Philippines?
Yes, yes. But I said that really that was not easy for me because I was, well, first I had my own responsibilities to take care for, and I did not want to interfere. I mean, use my position to influence the U.S. I would tell them how they could get appointments and so on. I would help them in that way, but not directly interfering, no?
There are concerns that under the Trump administration, it's harder to get a visa or to get U.S. citizenship. Is there a
Yes,
basis for those
definitely.
concerns?
Oh yes, definitely.
That's true, okay.
Very true. Even getting an appointment today at the embassy is a lot tougher. Also because they've had also, you know, they've had some manpower challenges. They've had to reduce because of the, I guess, the efforts of the government to also reduce the number of federal workers. So that has also impacted the time it takes to be able to get a visa. No?
In your observation as to the strength of U.S.-Philippine relations under different administrations, what trend are you observing? And would you say that this varies under the different presidents that we've had in the Philippines?
Well, yes, definitely. As you will recall, during the time of President Duterte, he pivoted to China, and I'm sure during that time, the U.S. State Department were very concerned because it was very clear that President Duterte was favoring China over the U.S. And even in his speeches, he was quite clear in his choice for China rather than the U.S. But when you look at what we got from China, remember when he went on his trip to China in 2016, there were pledges of investments and loans up to the amount of $24 billion. There was a lot of fanfare, but when you look back, how much did we really get out of the 24 billion? I don't think we've gotten even 20% of that.
We did get some infrastructure that
Yes,
were
the
based
two
on
small
grants.
bridges.
Yes, that's true.
Two small bridges.
Pantaleon Estrella Bridge, the one that
Pantaleon,
connects
exactly.
from Makati
To-
all the way to Mandaluyong.
Correct.
And I believe there was also a bridge in Binondo.
Yes.
But in terms of pledges that were received and the actual translation to investments, do you see that under this administration with President Bongbong Marcos, he's made several state visits also to the United States, including trade visits supposedly, where we got pledges. Are you seeing more conversion into actual investments?
I think we're seeing a lot more American investments, definitely, particularly in the energy sector, in the healthcare sector, and I think infrastructure. We're also getting more investments from the American firms. What I always give credit to President Marcos Jr. is the fact that we repivoted back to the U.S., and that has enabled us to strengthen our economic and military alliance with the U.S., especially when it comes to our military defense. You know, there were 5 EDCA bases. Well,
and then 4
and
additional.
then we added 4 additional EDCA bases that will, of course, fortify our self-defense.
Yeah. Let's talk about EDCA much more later, but
Yes.
what is the value of U.S. support? How important is U.S. support for the Philippine economy and also the politics in the Philippines? But before you answer this question, we'll have to take a short break. At the Forefront, we'll be right back. Welcome back at the Forefront. We continue our conversation with former Philippine ambassador to the U.S., Jose Cuisia Jr. Ambassador
Yes.
Joe, merong mga nagsasabi, some people were saying that the support of the U.S. is very essential to the stability of the politics in the Philippines, even during the massive rallies when some people were calling for the resignation of President Bongbong Marcos. Some people were saying that he will remain to be president until the U.S. supports him. And they also point out to Ferdinand Marcos Sr., where some of the speculation was that he only was overthrown after the U.S. withdrew support. Of course, these are just opinions, but what is your take on that?
Well, the U.S. will not publicly say that they support one president over somebody that's being, touted as a possible candidate and so on. They will not do that. But it is important, of course, that the U.S. shows its support for the current administration. And that comes in many ways. And one way, of course, is the military support that we get. And clearly, we have been getting much more military support under President Marcos than under the previous President Duterte. And as you said earlier, Attorney Karen, that it is also important for the economic support because for the American investors particularly will not be investing in the country unless they know that their own government is supporting this administration. No? And this is why we're seeing much greater American interest in investing in the Philippines. Mm-hmm. And that's why it's very important that we continue to get that support. And we're seeing that in terms of the support they're providing in modernizing the armed forces of the Philippines, in developing these EDCA bases. And we know, of course, that they're going to benefit from it too. It's not only for our own benefit, but also for their own benefit. No?
You seem to have foreseen my next question, which was because you mentioned the increase in EDCA sites. My question was, what would be the benefit to our country of having more EDCA sites? But you mentioned that these are very important to the Philippines. Yes. What are the disadvantages? Like, for example, if the tensions between the U.S. and China increases, would the Philippines be a casualty because of these EDCA sites?
Yes, that is one of the risks. Where there are benefits, there are also risks. The benefits, of course, is they're investing a lot in developing these sites. They're employing a lot of people. They're creating small businesses because of their presence around these bases. There's a lot more economic activity in all of these EDCA bases. But they're also contributing in terms of modernizing our armed forces because it is important for us to be able to have interoperability with the American forces, whether it be at sea or in the air. Our armed forces, the Navy, the Air Force, must be able to have this interoperability. And this is why it's important that they be present in these bases. Please remember that these are still Philippine bases. These are not U.S. bases. They are being given access by the Philippine government, but they remain to be Philippine bases. But
and you think that's a very important distinction between
because
having an EDCA site that's still a Philippine base versus
Yes.
before when we had U.S. bases?
Right, because there are sectors, even in Congress, who are saying that we have given up our sovereignty by yielding to the U.S. these bases. That's not right, because the Philippines continues to maintain control over those bases.
And would you agree with the decision under the Cory administration not to allow the extension of U.S. bases in the Philippines?
Well, you know, we actually tried to lobby in the Senate for the extension. Then Secretary Jesse Stanislao and I were given instructions by President Cory to try to convince the senators, because we were talking about the economic benefits to the Philippines.
So
about
President
the
Cory
extension.
Aquino was in favor of
Yes,
extending the bases.
at that point, she was. But of course, she had to listen also to her advice. She had advisors like Secretary Alran Bengson, who was the head of that panel that was asked to study whether we should extend the base or not. We talked also to the American negotiator to try to see if we could get more benefits from the U.S., but we had to point out to the Senate what we were going to lose if the bases were not extended.
With the increase of EDCA sites in the Philippines, some criticize this administration under PBBM as not being able to negotiate for lower tariffs for the Philippines. Do you think that there's still hope for us to get lower tariffs in the United States?
I was also concerned about that because, as I pointed out, I think in one of the interviews I had with a business reporter, that Vietnam, which had a $123 billion trade surplus with the U.S. in 2024, we only had a $4.9 billion trade surplus. Vietnam's tariff was lowered from 46% to 20%. Ours, on the other hand, went up from 17% to 19%. So I said a former enemy gets a much better treatment.
Yeah, that's strange.
Whereas a long-time ally like the Philippines, unfortunately, sees an increase in the tariff from 17 to 19. So I could not understand.
And Ambassador Joey, unfortunately, we're running out of time. So the last question I want to ask you, the term of the current ambassador, Mary Kay Carlson, is due to end soon. What do you know of her successor?
I don't know much except that he is a businessman, or he was a businessman in Florida in the real estate sector. He's been trying to, I understand he's trying to read about the Philippines, trying to talk to people about the Philippines. And of course, he has a good relationship with President Trump, and he wants to be able to help the Philippines.
So you're optimistic about the U.S.-Philippine relations
we've been
as well?
fortunate that we've had very good ambassadors from the U.S., but most of these, practically all, have been career ambassadors, from Ambassador Negroponte, Hubbard, Platt, of course, Harry Thomas, Christy Kenny,
and of course, the current one, Mary Kay Carlson.
And Mary Kay Carlson.
So it's the first time we're going to have a non-career ambassador as an
I think
appointee.
it's the first time, yeah.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Joey.
My pleasure.
And we hope to have you back here for other
Attorney
interviews.
Karen, thank you. It's been a pleasure.
It's still not clear if the Senate bill seeking to end dual citizenship in the U.S. will be passed into law. But this early, Filipino Americans have expressed concern over the measure. Will President Trump support it, even if it will affect his son and wife? We will soon find out. Meanwhile, Washington continues to assure Manila of its support amid the continuing aggression of Chinese vessels in the West Philippine Sea. Be timely informed, be insightful of the news. I'm Attorney Karen Jimeno. Always stay at the forefront.